Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. We're here with Mesa County Compass, and today we're interviewing Mr. Ray Scott, who is running for Regent for CU. And welcome, Ray.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Give us just a little bit about your background, if you would, please, before we start interrogating you, okay?
Yes, with the lights.
This was a lot easier when you were 30, right?
Right.
Because you only had that much background. The problem is now when you get a little older, you have a lot of background, so it takes a little longer. But yeah, I'm basically a native of Colorado. Rifle, Colorado is where I grew up, went to school, came to Grand Junction, went to some schooling here at that time at Mesa State, and then just started a work career, really, working for oil and gas companies. I spent time here, of course, and then in New Mexico for a short period of time. And then, of course, back to the place I love the most, which is Mesa County, and hate to say this, but Garfield County too. So I kind of dual citizenship.
I was going to say dual allegiance there.
I know.
Here we are.
And so you're running for CU Regent. When I went over to State Assembly, I had no idea what CU Regent did or was or how much money they controlled. And I know especially I thought, whoa, I always just go, CU Regent, okay, nothing big. What do they do? Nobody knows. So tell us what they do and why it's important.
Well, it's interesting because it was put into our Constitution when we became a state in 1876. States were required to have a state college. So that's where CU came from. That's where it was born. And it's been the flagship university for Colorado for centuries.
Since then.
Yeah. So, that's where it came from. And for whatever reasons, they put it in the Constitution that you have to vote for the members of the board of directors, basically, for CU. So now there's 9, all 8 congressional districts and 1 at-large member. And most of what they do is watch the budget, right? That's a huge part of what they do. There's probably about $10 billion a year that they spend on the 4 campuses, plus other things that they do outside the campus facilities. They have 37,000 students today, which is just stunning. That's a city.
Huge responsibility.
It's a city. Don't have to get into the academics per se, like local school boards do, because they have chancellors and they have a president of the university, and all those things are kind of taken care of down the stream. But the big issue is the budget, right? Watching the money, and that's where being a fiscal conservative, I think, is going to be important because I can actually dig in. I'm used to a $30 billion budget at the state level. Don't want to diminish $10 billion, but it's quite a bit less.
But it's for a lot smaller thing too.
Exactly.
A little bit more manageable, however.
I think so, and it's funny because I'm so used to talking about things like lowering taxes, or building roads and bridges, or health and human services, all those things that you do at the state level as an elected representative there. So it's been I've had to adjust a little bit because it's not the same thing. It's much different. And yes, to your point, people have to Google it because they're like, what is this?
Right.
What is a CU Regent? Now, the past Regent, Glenn Gallegos, has been doing it for 12 years because it's a 6-year term.
Okay.
Which is funny because it doesn't pay anything, so they're going to make you stay there 6 years. It's like, really? But it is what it is. So I think people just kind of forgot about it, right? It's been so long that it's like, who's a CU Regent? What is that all about?
Right.
And of course, it's CD3, which is massive, of course.
Of course.
So it's going to, it's very difficult to try to run around CD3 and convince people to vote for it. So, yes, it's going to be interesting.
Yes.
You asked that. Basically, the question I was going to ask is just what is the job of the Regent? Because so many people just don't know. I was as you.
Sure.
I had no idea. So I didn't vote. Because I didn't know, I didn't vote. I know. but I always voted for everything else.
Right. I don't know if
It's okay.
I don't know if I think they're doing a good job or not, so I won't vote for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, feel like I have no business voting if I don't understand, and I didn't take the time, so
Sure.
I'm guilty of that.
Well, I think there's some things too that a lot of people don't know on top of what the budget issues are with CU, because their footprint is statewide. They have an engineering program with CMU, so they sponsor that with Colorado Mesa University. They do the same thing at Western State up in Gunnison. And from what perspective of what could you do different or what could you add on to that, I think there's some interesting things. They get about $400 million a year from the federal government for research. So they have about 35 research facilities, excuse me, from Boulder to Denver on Highway 36. Researching all kinds of things, right? I couldn't even probably rattle them off. Who's to say we shouldn't have one of those here? I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea. Depends on what other folks would think. But maybe we could get CU to have a research facility in Mesa County.
That would be maybe good for Mesa County.
It could be. I mean, again, it's an expense. Tie something together with our local university, and they can research whatever it might be, right? And pull some of those dollars to Mesa County and jobs, of course. So that'll be fun to explore. Who knows if that is a reality or not?
On that line, then, do you or will you ever have the occasion as a regent to do any lobbying for some of these funds?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. Because you're with a board of 9, so you would have a great opportunity to have discussions about that. I really do.
And you are fiscal conservative and a conservative. What does the rest of the board look like, and how will that affect decisions, do you
I'm
think?
glad you asked. One of the reasons I got in is I do know some of the regions, okay, just for full disclosure. They had asked me to look at this very closely. And I was kind of like, why, right? I mean, and they said, well, you need to understand something. The current regions are all academics. Most of them work for the university. So think about that in terms of our local school district. Would you want past D51 employees and or teachers being on your school board? In my opinion, it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house, right?
That's true.
So I looked at it and said, wow, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that, because are they just going to fall in line with the faculty and say, well, gosh, we don't want to make any waves because we don't know how to swim, and I don't want to upset Mary because I taught with her. Maybe that's the point.
It happens, yes.
The second point was interesting too, because they have a massive construction budget. They're about to embark on a $174 million project building an addition to the campus in Boulder.
Wow.
They have nobody on the board that has any construction background. Nobody.
It's very much needed.
So I actually talked with Heidi Ganal, who we all know, and I was talking to her about it, and I said, she goes, well, here's the deal. She goes, that division of operations would bring their budget to us as regions. And she goes, we just rubber stamped it because we didn't know anything about it.
Right.
That's not good. You need somebody that can actually dig in and figure out where they're spending the money, why they're spending the money, what are their processes, what are they up to, how are they doing subcontracting. There's a whole list of things you could do to really stay on top of a project like that. Make sure, because again, there's partly taxpayer money involved here. So, you always feel emboldened to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Right, or at least the student tuition, which is astronomical.
Exactly. And the only way you can lower that is if you lower expenses. So there you are.
I find that very interesting because you said that the regent isn't a paid position. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you think about the amount of work that you're going to have to put in, even though it may be periodic. It's still going to be massive amounts of things. If you're not sitting at that board meeting, you're still going to have to do tons of research and things like that in order to even make it feasible.
Well, it's funny, too, because my 93-year-old mother looked at me and said, the people in Colorado paid for 12 years of your education. You should go give some of it back. And I thought, I can't tell my mom she's right. So I was like, no, Mom, but, she's got a good point, right? It's like, okay, well, yeah, you guys paid to educate me on all the things that happen within the state. Okay, I'll give back.
That's great. Who? Tell us about the people that are running against you, and because I know at State Assembly again, they said, well, he just jumped in the race, and what's he doing? And
Who
then,
is that guy?
you came up with 40% of the vote.
Yeah.
So
I should have had more.
Yes, you did.
But
yeah.
there was people like this there. That was like, you know, I don't know what it is. I'm not good.
All right.
All right, fair.
Guilty.
Fair. It's fair. Well, you know, it's interesting because, again, the decision process took a little while because I was, again, talking to them over in Boulder and Denver and saying, hey, guys, do I really need to do this?
It's a lot of work.
It is. And they finally talked me into it. So, yes, there's the big concern. I mentioned this at the state convention. One of the concerns that's been brought up is that we have been getting decimated by Democrats. We got to be honest. They're beating us in all these different elections every cycle. We almost lost CD3, as we know, but there's a lot of reasons for that. So in my opinion, you better have the biggest gun you can have going into a race. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, other people, yes, I'm sure they're qualified to do lots of things. The person I'm running against is an ex-faculty member from CU. So again, it's back to the fox in the hen house, right? Mm-hmm. My understanding is she's only lived here a couple of years. She's from Denver, Boulder. And I kind of thought, well, you know, maybe this is something I better take a look at. Because I do believe, I mean, they've given, you know, Adam Frisch has, what, $11 million, I believe I said. Right. That's not going to end there. They're going to pump money into every seat they think they can win. Mm-hmm. If they perceive anybody's a weak candidate or doesn't have the experience to do the job, they're going to come both guns blazing. And it doesn't matter if it's Regent seat or governor seat or Congress seat, they don't care.
Or Secretary of State.
Or Secretary of State. They're going to come after everything. It doesn't
right.
matter.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the other thing that kind of played into it, even though I caught a little criticism. And I wasn't real happy about that because I didn't say anything bad about anybody. I just got up there and made my speech. And the next thing I know, the nominator is saying kind of some crummy things. And then in her speech, she did it too. And I was like, I don't even know you. You know, why would you even say that? But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
But they fired first, so I'll be glad to fire back. So
Good.
There you go.
So I'm going to ask one more. What do you see as the most pressing challenges facing CU, and how would you propose to address those?
There's more than a few, but it was just in the paper, and I think I posted something on Facebook about concealed carry. They're looking at banning all weapons on campus. I look at the Second Amendment. It's the shortest and most clear amendment that we have. I want those kids to have an opportunity to defend themselves. It's up to law enforcement to figure out who the bad people are, right? It's not up to the students. That's not their job. Bless you. So, yeah, that's one pressing issue, and it's right. It's happening right as we speak.
And that would be in your purview?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely one of those things where no. Not only, the short answer, as they say, is no. The long answer is hell no. I'm not going to allow them to take away Second Amendment rights from those students to be able to protect themselves. What better way to put a bullseye on a campus than saying, oh, by the way, nobody on this campus can be armed.
Gun-free zones, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is like bullseye, right? I mean, I just, people are going to make silly mistakes because we live in a country of free will, and it's hard to prevent those things, but you cannot write a policy. I remember doing this in the chamber one day, had up one of those big statute books when we were arguing gun rights, and the Democrats wanted to put in more restrictions. And as I threw the thing on the podium, I said, you cannot put one word in this book that will stop any gun violence. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's going to do something, they're going to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's a gun or a knife or a rock or a bottle. I mean, they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fact of life. It's unfortunate, but put more money into mental health and put more money into law enforcement on the campuses.
I think that would be something that would be an issue to be looked at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think mental health is a huge problem in this country alone, and let alone with our students from grade school on through college.
Right.
I think there needs to be more mental health help in the colleges. Would you be able to advocate for that?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no question. The kids have to understand that there's a safe place or a safe person to talk to. It doesn't need to be some Taj Mahal where everybody knows you're going in and out, those kind of things. But they need to come up with a system where the kids feel comfortable. Maybe it's other students that are involved. Mm-hmm. To sit down and talk to, draw the family in, and see if you can't help some way with the problem. Because those kids are under a lot of pressure.
They are.
It's a hard job getting an education. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's definitely different ways you could go about it.
Okay, and I have one last question. What are your views on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
We already are.
Yeah.
Right.
We're a very diverse society. We have laws in place that everybody has the same freedoms. Everybody has the same opportunity. This whole irate wokeism that's built up is just political theater. It really is. I mean, because all the rights people scream that they don't have, they have. All the things they say they are not allowed to do because of race, color, creed, whatever they want to say, they do have those opportunities. You have to take advantage of those opportunities. It's that simple.
Simple. Very good.
And how do you see your role? What changes would you like to see happen at CU during your tenure?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. Number one is watch that budget, make sure that everything is going where it should. Another thing I think that needs to happen in CD3 is more outreach to the public so that we don't have a problem where you go, what is this? What is this? What do you do? Whether it be through the university that's here, which I think is important because you want to keep that cohesion of people understanding there's a difference between the two. But also look at other programs that you can do. We've talked about outreach today, as far as getting to other groups of people out there and having discussions. Showing kids if they want, now this is important, if they want the path to higher education, if they want the path, that's great. And show them that path, right?
Right.
But if they want another vocation, don't pressure them to say, well, you have to go to college, you won't be successful. But I know on the eastern slope that CU sponsors days for kids in middle school to come to CU, to see the university, to meet the faculty, to understand what it's all about. I don't know that they give those opportunities to kids on this side of the mountain. But I'd like to advance that and make that a bigger program.
I really don't know that either because as my kids were coming up, I don't think they ever had that opportunity.
They may not have, no.
I really don't.
I think they do more career days.
Career day is about it. But
Yep.
And I think they also, I know Rick Taggart was involved with School to Career.
Gotcha.
So when he was,
Sure.
when he had his business here, before he became a representative.
And what resources could be brought to bear, I don't know at this point, but I know they invest about $4 million a year on the Western Slope in different programs all over the backside of the state. But I don't know exactly what those are at this point. But I think all those things to be on the table to take a look at and do more.
exactly.
Because they are the flagship. I mean, whether anybody else likes that or not, they are the flagship university.
They are.
Right.
True.
And they have Deion Sanders. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right.
Shouldn't have said that one. I'm sorry.
So the 9 members on the board, what do you see as roadblocks? So you've got some ideas of things you'd like to see. What do you see as the roadblocks with the other members?
Well, they are Democrats. Okay, so
how many?
well, it's a 5 and 4
Conservatives.
right now. So it's
Oh,
5
okay.
Democrats, 4 Republicans. Again, that's the importance of making sure we hang on to the seat, and hopefully in a couple of years pick up another seat, so that we have some control. Because it's really no different in the legislature, right? You're in the minority, so you can have a wonderful idea, and if the Democrats don't like it, it's over. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, because it is a partisan board. Yeah, so that's the biggest roadblock is Democrats and trying to convince them that their ideas are not the only ideas. And if they're all academics, which I do know they are, that's a different discussion, because they're, and I love them. They're very bright people. Didn't fit for me, but I mean, they're very bright. But you have to talk at a different level. I mean, you have to come up with ways to convince them that it's smart to do certain things that maybe they're not used to.
Right.
And that is tough.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
Oh, yeah.
when you're talking practical bricks and
Oh
mortar
yeah,
things.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think they would embrace that, because it's funny how all the work I did with CDOT or against CDOT, Democrats in the House and the Senate would actually come over to my way of thinking because they just didn't know. And if somebody's fundamentally, for an example, not being paid for work, that doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat.
Right.
That's just wrong. It's just wrong. And,
Right.
and they would recognize that, and we were able to work together through some things, not everything.
They're just showing them where you could get along.
But exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So with tuition rates going up and up and up,
Yep.
and then with student loans going up and up and up, is there any way that the CU Regent addresses either of those things?
Again, I think the way you have to approach that is if it's a fiscal issue, fiscal issues create those higher type tuitions. If you're not good stewards of the money coming into the university, it's going to be a problem keeping tuitions down. And that means everything, whether it's salaries for faculty, if it's maintenance, it doesn't matter what it is. You have to look at all those things basically through a microscope and say, wait a minute. I've always been one, and maybe you've heard me say this in other venues, you could cut government spending by 20% across the board. I don't care if it's Mesa County, the city, the state, the nation. You wouldn't even notice it. You just wouldn't you wouldn't notice it. And that's a big chunk of change depending on the number of decimal points that, wherever you put the decimal point. So yeah, I've always been a proponent of saying, hey, listen, let's cut deep, and then if we find something we went a little too far, then let's go back and have a discussion about that.
You can always move from no to yes.
Exactly.
You can't go back the other way.
It's really hard to,
It is indeed.
Do you have further questions? Or what are some things that you think we should know? I know that you're pretty modest and you don't refer to your time that you served in the Senate and when it was and how long you served and what expertise that helps you with in this new position.
Well, it's interesting because being in the Senate, I never dreamed I'd be there for 12 years. I didn't. I guess that shows a character flaw, right?
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword. There's a certain group of people out there that say, well, he's part of the establishment because he served in, okay. But the other part of that sword is knowledge, right? The other side. Because it's hard to get that institutional knowledge to understand how does this all work? How does the system actually move? And it took me a few years to figure out a lot of this stuff, right? I didn't just walk in and go, hey, I'm a genius. So you have that double-edged sword you have to deal with. Yes, you'll never convince certain people that, well, you're part of the establishment. But I'll tell you what, I think there's a little bit of movement from that, and I think we've had our situations in CD3 now that we're all used to, that's happened, that shows that knowledge would have been better, right? Because the big fight back then was youth, enthusiasm, and all the things that other candidates brought to the table back then. I'm trying not to use names, as you can probably tell.
Right.
But what did that get you? Okay, it got you a loud voice and somebody that abandoned us.
Right.
And the other things that happened were all youth type things, right? She's just a young lady, just made mistakes. So is it time to have a little more knowledge and experience in certain key positions? I think so. And if those people are willing to step up and do it, I think we should embrace them. I really do.
So what's the best way for it, do you think, for a candidate to, one, get their message out, and two, to convince people to get more active and to make choices? Because I was thinking about this the other day, that we were told that actually the city is more conservative than it is liberal, city of Grand Junction, but conservatives don't come out and don't go to an event and say, hey, this is what I think. They stay home and say, oh, well, I've got soccer and I've got this and mom's been sick and so I can't go.
Sure.
And it's not the case on the other side.
Right.
And so no one knows what the silent majority thinks.
Right.
And they don't have any impact. So how do you change that?
Well, we got into this space a few years ago. I call it political rage, where if you went and kicked windows in and flipped cars over and did really bad things, you got the attention. The television cameras went to you.
Right.
And now that there's no ramifications, basically, for bad behavior, right? There are a certain group of the population that go, I don't want to be out there. I don't know what these people are going to do.
Be a part of that.
I don't want to be a part of that. I'm a little nervous about this. And I 100% get that. Public safety is just a scary thing right now. Even here in good old Grand Junction, it's kind of like, wow. So, yeah, it's very difficult to get to those people. Now, today, as you know, also social media is our big platform for news, which I don't care for, but it kind of is what it is because we don't have the media presence that we need in Grand Junction. So people look to social media for their information. Of course, emails, which I got a funny story since you mentioned it. You didn't pay attention, but it's because it just breaks. I crack up every time I do this, but because what happens is you'll get a list. I think our list for the Pueblo show was about 800-ish, in that range. So you put together a nice email and you put all the points in there that you want to go with, and you shoot it out. Now, about 40%. Now I was actually lucky because 40% opened the email, and the national average is like 20. So I did pretty good. I got it out there pretty good. But what's funny is the people that never open it, or they unsubscribe right away because they don't want to hear about anything you have to say, or they report you for being spam. I sit back and look at the computer screen and I just chuckle like, okay, Republicans and conservatives, you say you don't want to watch Facebook for your news, but then when somebody tries to give you some news, you reject it. You just I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear from you. Nothing. And I'll see that trend keep going through the rest of this election. It'll happen again. But so you're kind of left with some very interesting tactics. We're already talking about what you do. And this, again, is bad because what happens is candidates, and it doesn't matter if it's congressional or not, look at the population centers. And in our case, it's Pueblo, Mesa, La Plata's kind of on the map, Garfield, Montrose a little bit, so to speak, and nobody else. Because the population's not there, the voters aren't there.
And it's such a huge district.
It's such a huge district that and you're going to have to spend money. So you have to focus on the areas where you can get the most percentage of votes.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because everybody else gets left out. They don't get to hear a lot of things that you're going to do, unless they happen to just pop into your Facebook page or something like that and see something. But and again, that's something I don't like because now there's a whole group of people that are uninformed.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Point the finger.
This is fun. You got a parallel. Yeah. You got it.
My attitude has changed a lot in the last few years. Believe me. But on that note, then, so how will people be able to find you and be able to read and understand, get to know you?
Well, you can go to rayscott.co. That's my website. Some people will do that. Some won't. These flyer things that I gave you today, those will be going into the walkers that I think your group's kicking out Saturday. Direct mail has gotten so cost prohibitive.
It has.
I can't. If I just had to throw in, I bet it's $100,000.
Oh my goodness!
If you tried to mail to somebody in CD3, and then there's what's called the 3-second rule, which I learned years ago. Somebody will take your piece of mail that you've got 3 seconds before it hits the trash can. That's it. I don't think there's too many people that put it up on the refrigerator so they can go look at it every day and go, "Ooh, that was so good."
Ray Scott sent me something. That's so true.
That doesn't happen. So it's a television's very expensive. You can't afford to do that. So it comes down to kind of the digital messages, the digital footprints, which is the Facebooks, the Twitters, all those things, and you do the best you can.
Yeah.
And you try to get people you kind of ask them to go take a look at something to see what they think.
Right.
And they'll either think,
and I will flash this.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's. I could almost say my grandson did that, but I wouldn't say that.
Oh. And the last question is on the ranked voting.
Ranked choice
Talk
voting.
to us about that.
Sure. I think all the things we've discussed today, and before we got on the camera, is pushing that whole narrative. Right. Unaffiliateds are not involved. We can't. It's hard to locate them. They do that for a reason in some cases. They don't want the mail, right? They don't want the phone calls. I understand that. I totally understand it. But then it's very hard for them to be informed. I think that's driving it. I think the younger voters that are saying, we just don't want to be involved, our vote does not count. I think that's another thing that's pushing it.
Yes.
The polling data is looking pretty strong that they're going to probably get it approved. And and everybody out there that's watching this, I would Google it. There's some really good information on it out there. It's a little confusing on how it works, but the idea is you take parties out of the races and you put people in the races. So even in our races as Republicans, that would be gone, and you would have 5 candidates. You would have a Republican, a Democrat, maybe 2 Democrats, an unaffiliated, maybe another Republican, a Libertarian. You'd have all these people stacked up on your ballot. And you would have to then say, well, I don't know who that is. I got to figure out who that is. Listen to them and decide who you're going to vote for. And then that all takes place. And then you get a second ballot, which narrows it down, I believe, I may be off a little bit, down to 3, because 2 of them didn't make it.
Right.
Then the process starts all over again. And then you get down to 2. So there's 3 actual ballots.
It's kind of a cumbersome.
It's expensive.
It sounds really expensive.
It's got
expensive, cumbersome.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. It really will.
But that will be on the ballot this November.
Well, they're going through what they call the title board now in Denver to verify everything. But I think I'm pretty sure it's going to make the trip, and then it'll be on the ballot in November.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
right now, the polling shows that Coloradoans will say yes. So
Okay, well,
it could be very interesting. I know, but yeah,
They need to be informed on
exactly.
that.
But
Is that something that they think would be good
Right.
for us?
right.
Yeah.
Well, and if we're sitting here in Mesa County, a very red district. Now the Democrats would say, well, that'll break up Mesa County.
Mm-hmm.
We as Republicans would say, well, that breaks up the Democrat districts in Denver. We don't know if it does or it
don't know,
doesn't.
right.
So it could be very interesting. I mean, Sarah Palin lost up in Alaska because they use ranked choice voting.
Oh.
And everybody thought, well, Sarah Palin, she'll win. She didn't.
she didn't.
She didn't.
And that's the thing about it. Then it becomes not a party affiliation that wins. It's going to be the person, but people have to listen.
Well, and then there's the problem too with the money.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yeah.
then it could boil down to who has the most money.
Right. Well, it's funny. I think it was Tip O'Neill made a quote back when he and Reagan were working together. He was asked about elections and money, and of course it was much smaller then.
Mm-hmm.
But his comment was I always found very interesting. What he said was, if you have money, it doesn't mean you're going to win. But if you don't have any money, you're definitely going to lose.
Yeah.
That
And
makes sense.
it really holds true. It
Yes.
really does. It's
Yes.
just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, true.
So anyhow, that's where we're at today.
Oh my. Well, you have been listening to Mesa County Compass. This is the truth as we see it, the facts as we know them. You decide.
Thank you, Ray,
You
very much
betcha.
for joining us.
Thanks for having me.